You're watching Satluj TV News. I'm Angus Scott in London. At the end of the century, more than 2 billion people will be living in countries where extreme heat becomes life-threatening, according to researchers in Europe and China. Today's warning about life-threatening global warming says that extreme heat will make life unbearable for many in the global south, particularly in India. According to the research, areas in India and also parts of Nigeria and Indonesia will become almost uninhabitable because of extreme heat. Today, India needed no warning about the serious threat scorching heat poses to health. The Indian Meteorological Department issued a heatwave alert for 7 southern and central states last week. But it has now broadened it to the capital and some northern states. It's warned that blistering heat will continue for the next few days before rains bring some relief. But in the meantime, the authors of today's report on global warming say evidence shows humans have historically flourished in regions where the temperature is around 13 degrees Celsius. Monsoon areas in South Asia have also fared well, peaking at around 27 degrees Celsius. But the report says people living in areas outside of these favoured climates are less likely to thrive. Using previously published research, the report says human health declines for many reasons, such as poor agriculture, which in turn implies poor diet and nutrition. Extreme heat also leads to lost days of employment and poorer economic outcomes, as well as having a direct effect on human health, according to Professor Tim Lenton from the University of Exeter in the UK.
And so when we consider temperature and precipitation together, you get this interesting structure that there's a big hump of people flourishing in the cooler conditions. There's a sort of a warm, dry, less good for flourishing. And then there's a sort of hotter, wetter, monsoonal climate flourishing. And then things drop off really sharply at higher temperatures.
The study calculates that by conservative projections, the temperature will have reached 2.7 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels in the year 2100, which means 2 billion people would be living in life-threatening climatic conditions. According to Lenton, less than 1% of humanity currently lives in places of dangerous heat exposure. But the study shows climate change has already put 9% of the population, that's more than 600 million people, outside this favoured niche area. Lenton believes it's important not just to focus on the deaths that will occur because of extreme heat. He believes it's also important to focus on how efforts to hold down global temperatures will now save billions of lives in the future.
I'm sincerely hoping this study does one little thing towards encouraging to double up our efforts to limit global warming as close as we can to 1.5 degrees centigrade and not go anywhere near 2.7 degrees centigrade. Because in simple terms, each 0.1 degrees C of warming or warming avoided really matters. It can reduce the numbers exposed to unprecedented heat by 140 million people, each 0.1 degrees C. So there's a spectacular amount to be gained in more decisive climate action.
In Paris in 2015, global signatories to the Climate Change Convention agreed on a goal to keep temperatures at no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Dr. Friederike Otto, a climate scientist from the Grantham Institute for Climate Change and the Environment at Imperial College London, who was not involved in the report, had this to say about the research.
What this report highlights is that the hotter it gets, the more people will be living in these dangerous conditions and the more people will die from extreme heat. But I think it's really important to highlight that there is nothing magic about 1.5 degrees. Already today at 1.2 degrees, many people are dying.
Otto says there is good reason that heat waves are called the silent killers, referring to the deaths from excessive heats. She continued,
"We often don't notice these deaths because people don't drop dead on the street, but it's usually those with least economic means who live in poor housing that die in their homes and are, if ever, some statistic later."
As one of the leading nations and certainly one of the world's most populous, India certainly bears a huge responsibility in addressing growing global temperatures, not least because it stands to suffer potentially the most. You've been watching Satluj TV News, and you can find more stories in detail on our channel, that's Satnet News, so it's worth clicking on that subscribe button to make sure you get to see stories as they're broadcast. And don't forget, if you have any comments or opinions on any of our news stories, you can comment below, or indeed drop us a direct message at message@satlujtv.com, and we would love to hear from you. In the meantime, thanks for watching. For Satluj TV News, I'm Angus Scott in London.